I was cruising past my son-in-law's place when it hit me to swing in and see how he was doing. But the second my eyes caught my wife's car sitting at the gate, a gleaming silver Lexus that should have been parked safe in our garage, my stomach dropped like a stone. A bad feeling wrapped around my chest and squeezed. Something's off, I thought. I eased up to the window as quietly as I could, careful not to make a sound that would give me away. What I heard on the other side of that glass ripped my world apart. When the old fool finally signs the papers, we'll have everything we planned for. Linda's voice floated out through the half-open window, cold and sharp, seeping into me like poison. I sat there frozen in my car outside Sophie's house, the keys still hanging in the ignition. Not 10 minutes earlier I'd called my daughter, hoping to surprise her with a dinner invite. "Sorry, Dad, I'm not home, but Mark's there working on some case files," she'd said, cheerful as ever. Yet here was Linda's Lexus, parked bold as brass right in the driveway. I shut off the engine and walked toward the window, my legs trembling like I'd just come off a 12-hour shift. Through a slit in the curtains, I saw them plain as day, Linda, my wife of 25 years, lounging on my daughter's couch like she owned it, and Mark leaning against the bookshelf with that smug, self-satisfied look I'd grown to hate. "The timeline's perfect," Mark was saying in that clipped, confident lawyer tone of his. "File in June. Claim irreconcilable differences. With the new Iowa statutes, Linda's entitled to half of everything from the marriage, plus lifetime spousal support." Linda laughed, that high, tinkling laugh I once thought was charming. "The construction business alone is worth $12 million. Add in the rentals, the vacation place, the investments, we're talking nearly $20 million total." My hands were shaking as I dug for my phone, hitting record right as Mark kept going with his legal sermon. "The beautiful part is his trusting nature. Ethan has no idea we've been documenting his assets for months, bank statements, property deeds, business valuations. It's all copied already." He nodded toward a manila folder on the coffee table. "He practically handed us the keys to his kingdom." 25 years playing the devoted wife," Linda said, admiring her nails, pretending to care about his dull construction stories, nodding when he worried about payroll. "God, the man actually believes I love him." A twig snapped under my foot. Both their heads whipped toward the window like spooked deer. My heart slammed against my ribs, and sweat ran down my back despite the cool April air. "Did you hear something?" Linda's voice was tight. "Probably the neighbor's cat," Mark muttered after a beat. "You're paranoid. Can you blame me? If Ethan found out." "He won't. That man couldn't spot a conspiracy if it wore a neon sign." His laugh dripped with contempt. "By September, you'll be divorced, rich, and free to do whatever you please with whoever you want." I stayed pressed to the wall, my phone recording every poisonous word, until they went back to talking. When I finally slipped back to my car 15 minutes later, my entire life felt tilted and wrong. 25 years of marriage, I realized, had just been reduced to a business plan between my wife and my son-in-law. That folder on the coffee table, months of quiet scheming, documenting, and plotting, burned in my mind. While I was busting through 16-hour days to build our future, they'd been charting out its destruction. I sat in the driver's seat staring at my hands gripping the steering wheel, the same hands that built my company from nothing, bought Linda every luxury she enjoyed, even walked her down the aisle when her own father wouldn't show. And her words kept replaying, "The man actually believes I love him." The cruelest part. Half an hour earlier, I really did believe it. The front door swung open just as I reached for my keys. Linda stepped out first, her designer bag swaying like she was walking a runway. Mark followed, adjusting his tie like he was in some corporate commercial. They didn't expect to see me, and the shock hit Linda's face like a slap. "Ethan." Her voice went high. "What are you doing here?" I forced my face into something neutral, even though my pulse was pounding. 25 years of marriage had taught me to read her like a book, but apparently, the whole story had been fiction. "Just wrapped up an inspection nearby," I said smoothly, climbing out of the car. Figured I'd swing by and see Sophie. Mark edged a little closer to Linda, protective, sizing me up with those cold gray lawyer eyes like he was looking for cracks in a witness. She's not here, Linda cut in quickly. We were just, going over some legal papers for one of Mark's clients. Her lie came so easily it made me wonder how many more I'd swallowed without a thought. Oh yeah. I kept my tone light. Thought you had work until 6 today. Didn't you mention the Henderson proposal this morning? A flicker of panic passed over her face. I left early. Headache. Sorry to hear that. I turned to Mark with fake friendliness. Working on something interesting? Asset division, he said before catching himself, for a divorce client. Complex finances. The irony would have been funny if it weren't gutting me. Linda's eyes flicked between us, measuring. How long have you been here, Ethan? Just pulled up. Why? No reason. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You seem tense. Everything okay? The woman plotting to ruin me was asking about my mood. I nearly laughed in her face. Long day. You know how it is. I nodded toward Mark. Don't let me interrupt your work. We were just wrapping up, Mark said, placing his hand low on Linda's back. It looked natural, too natural. Good timing, then. I pulled out my phone to check the time, making sure they saw it. Mark's gaze lingered on the screen a beat too long. I should get home. Dinner won't make itself. Linda gave a forced laugh. I'll be along soon. Just a few more things to finish here. Take your time. I opened my car door, then stopped like I'd just remembered something. Oh, Linda, I said casually, Dr. Patterson's office called earlier. Something about rescheduling your physical, said there was a conflict with your work schedule. For the briefest second, her expression went blank, like a poker player who just realized their bluff had been called. But she bounced back fast, smoother than I'd expected. Must be some mix-up, she said lightly. I'll call them later. No big deal. These things happen. I slid into the driver's seat, my heart pounding in my ears. See you both later, I said, forcing the words out evenly. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught sight of them in the rearview mirror. They stood there frozen until my car turned the corner, then moved in closer, heads bent together in a quick, urgent conversation. That was it, the triangle was complete. They suspected I might have heard something. I knew they were working to destroy me. And all three of us were acting like everything was perfectly normal. Linda would head home separately, rehearsing her excuses, why she'd left work early, why she'd been at Mark's house. By the time she crossed our threshold, she'd probably have a dozen reasonable explanations ready to go. But there was one thing she didn't know, sitting in my pocket was 43 minutes of crystal clear audio that could blow her whole game wide open. As I merged into traffic, my hands felt steadier than they had in the last hour. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something sharper, colder, more focused. They thought they were playing chess with a guy who only knew checkers. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The 15-minute ride home blurred past in a haze of traffic lights and muscle memory. Before I knew it, my Honda was turning into the circular driveway, past the manicured gardens Linda insisted we pay a crew to maintain, past the overpriced fountain she'd commissioned for our 20th anniversary. I didn't get out right away. I sat there staring at the house I'd built with my own hands back in '95. Every beam, every nail, every detail had been my love letter to the woman now plotting to take it from me. When I finally stepped inside, the silence felt different, no longer peaceful, but hollow. Normally, Linda's presence filled these rooms with her running commentary, gossip about the neighbors, rants about store clerks, excitement over whatever new thing she'd bought. Now I had to wonder, how much of that had been real, and how much had been an act. My eyes landed first on the wedding photo over the mantel. December 15, 1987. Linda in ivory silk, glowing, me awkward in a rented tux but beaming all the same. She was 22 then, working as a secretary at Morrison & Associates. I was 37, finally turning a real profit after a decade of 12-hour days and instant noodles. We'd met at the company Christmas party. Morrison had been a client, and I'd renovated their offices that spring. Linda laughed at some awful concrete mixer joke I made, a laugh that hit me like a gut punch. When I asked her to dinner, she blushed and said yes so fast I almost wondered if she'd been waiting for me to do it. That first dinner at Romano's stretched until midnight. She listened like my dreams mattered, about building homes that would last, that would outlive us both. You're not just building structures, she told me, reaching across the table, you're building homes. I proposed 6 months later. The kitchen table still held our 25th anniversary card from last December, Linda's neat handwriting in blue ink, to my wonderful husband, thank you for making all my dreams come true. Here's to 25 more years of happiness. All my love, Linda. All her love. The words tasted sour now. In the living room, Sophie's baby pictures filled the shelves I'd built during Linda's pregnancy. June 8, 1995, Linda, exhausted but radiant, holding our red-faced little miracle. Those early years were the happiest I'd known. She threw herself into motherhood the way she'd once thrown herself into planning our wedding, parent-teacher meetings, soccer games, themed birthday parties. She photographed everything with pride. You're the best father in the world, she told me through tears the night Sophie graduated high school. She's going to do amazing things because of the foundation you gave her. The foundation I gave her, I noticed now, not we. I sank into my leather recliner, the one Linda always said was too ugly for the formal living room, and let the memories roll over me. Our 10th anniversary cruise to Alaska, her awe at the glaciers. Sophie's college graduation, 3 of us crying as she crossed the stage with her psychology degree. Christmas mornings where Linda insisted on decorating the whole house like a department store window. When had gratitude turned into entitlement? When had thank you for giving us this life turned into we deserve even more? The answer, I realized, was in the recording on my phone. Linda hadn't loved me for years, maybe decades. Every kiss, every whispered I love you, every anniversary celebration had been calculated to keep me working, earning, building, so she could one day take half. I sat there in the dim light, surrounded by the physical proof of what I believed was a happy marriage, and felt something icy and deliberate take root. She thought she was playing the long game, setting herself up for the biggest payout while keeping her tracks covered. What she didn't realize was that I'd built my life by thinking strategically. The same mind that had turned a small construction outfit into an empire wasn't about to roll over and hand it all away. And in that moment, I knew, the game was about to change. $50 million over 3 years, our biggest contract in company history. The night I signed that deal back in April, I came home expecting a celebration. Maybe champagne on ice, maybe that proud, excited look Linda had always given me after big wins. But instead of popping corks, she was parked at the kitchen table with a real estate magazine and a calculator. This means we can finally get the house on Elm Street, she announced without even glancing up. The one with the pool and the circular drive. The Hendersons are asking $4.2 million. No, congratulations. No, I'm proud of you. Not even a word about the 300 people who'd have steady work for the next 3 years. Just straight to spending the money, her money in her mind. Linda, I haven't even broken ground yet, I said. There's design work, permits, subcontractor bids. But the city's paying once you sign, right? She finally looked at me then, her green eyes sharp, calculating. I mean, the contract's locked. The money's guaranteed. That conversation dragged on for 2 hours. She'd mapped out every expense, the house, a country club membership, luxury cars, European vacations. The pronouns were telling. It wasn't our membership or our vacations. It was hers. By the next year, 2021, her demands had grown teeth. The country club wasn't optional once the Pattersons joined Riverside Hills. Our perfectly fine vacation cabin in Wisconsin became embarrassing compared to the Johnsons' ski place in Aspen. She started making little jabs, stories about other wives whose husbands really understood how to treat a woman. The physical closeness faded so gradually I blamed age and stress. Then came separate bedrooms, allegedly because of my snoring, which had never bothered her in 23 years. Dinner talk shifted too. It wasn't, "How was your day?" anymore, it was blow-by-blow reports of what other couples owned, achieved, or flaunted. Sarah Mitchell's husband got her a Mercedes for their anniversary, she'd said last month, carving her salmon like a surgeon, just because he appreciated everything she sacrificed for their marriage. Sacrificed. Like living in luxury while supporting my career was some kind of hardship. After Sophie's wedding in September 2023, her friendship with Mark kicked into overdrive. Suddenly, Linda was fascinated by legal matters, asking Mark hypothetical questions about property division and spousal rights for a friend. Calls started coming in that she'd taken another room, claiming they were book club or volunteer meetings. I know now a lot of them were strategy sessions. When I replayed parts of today's recording, Mark's voice saying, "We've been documenting his assets for months," and Linda's laugh, 25 years of playing the devoted wife, it all clicked. The questions about business valuations, her sudden obsession with financial statements, her push for joint accounts while keeping her own credit cards, she'd been running reconnaissance while I kept building the very empire she planned to strip from me. But she'd made a fatal mistake, she underestimated me. The same mind that had built Cole Construction from a single truck and a borrowed tool set was now turning every ounce of experience toward dismantling her little scheme. She thought she was playing chess against someone who didn't even know the rules. She'd been setting her pieces for months, thinking I wasn't watching the board. She was about to learn different. I left the recliner and walked into my office, where 3 decades of business history lined the shelves, tax returns, contracts, deeds, partnership agreements. All the paperwork she thought she was secretly collecting. But the real assets? She didn't even know where to look. I pulled out my phone and found the contact I needed, Marcus Webb, my accountant, my friend, and the only person who knew about the offshore accounts I'd set up years ago for tax efficiency. Perfectly legal, fully documented, and invisible to anyone without serious forensic skills. Time to make a call that would change the entire game. 3 days later, my office looked like a command center. 2 laptops running, screens full of bank statements, legal databases, and property records. Yellow legal pads covered in columns labeled assets, weaknesses, timeline, leverage. I'd shaved that morning, put on my navy suit, and slipped on the reading glasses Linda always said made me look distinguished. Funny how quickly grief turns into precision when you've got 35 years of deal-making under your belt. Marcus had been more helpful than I'd dared hope. The offshore accounts? Completely untouched. Linda's little asset hunt had missed the crown jewels entirely, she'd been cataloging the visible kingdom while the real treasure stayed hidden in plain sight. Meanwhile, her credit card statements painted their own story, $47,000 in transfers over 8 months to a joint savings account I'd never heard of. The listed beneficiary? Markeel Thompson. So much for just friends. The receipts told the rest. Lunches at Riverside Country Club, $300 spa visits, designer clothes conveniently bought on book club nights. She was clearly building her new life ahead of schedule. The cherry on top. 8 Hermes handbags she bought just last Tuesday, right after telling me groceries were getting too expensive. Mark, as it turned out, had his own soft spots. My contacts in the construction world were generous with dirt about Davenport's top attorney. The man planning to take my fortune was barely keeping his own head above water, drowning in debt. $180,000 in student loans. An $8,500 a month office lease he picked for image instead of common sense. And a reputation, growing fast, for bending the rules whenever cash got tight. Thompson's sharp, Jack Morrison from Morrison Concrete had told me over coffee, but the man's got champagne tastes on a beer budget. Owes 3 of my subcontractors about 25 grand combined. Promises to square up next week, then disappears until the heat dies down. The state bar's site was even more revealing, 2 ethics complaints in the past year over mishandled client funds. Both dismissed, but still they're in black and white. In law, even a cleared charge leaves a scar. I sat back in my leather chair, eyes moving over 72 hours of meticulous notes. Linda and Mark had misread me completely. They'd pegged me for the easygoing husband who worked too much, trusted too easily, and never noticed the nickels and dimes bleeding out of the household accounts. They forgot that the same mind that grew coal construction from one beat-up truck into a $12 million operation still worked just fine outside of job sites. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. Sophie's name lit the screen. "Hey, sweetheart." I kept my tone light. "How's your day going?" "Dad. I need to ask you something." Her voice was neutral, the kind she used with patience on sensitive ground. "Is everything okay between you and Mom? Lately there's been this weird tension when you're both in the room." My fingers tightened around the phone. How much had she picked up? How much had Mark already fed her? "What makes you ask?" "Little things," she said. "Mom's been stressed about money, which doesn't make sense since business is great. And Mark keeps asking me these odd questions about your company, how the partnerships work, who controls what assets. I don't know, it feels like they're fishing for information." Fishing. That's exactly what they've been doing. And my daughter, trained to spot predatory behavior, had seen the hook. "Probably just curiosity about business," I told her carefully. "You know your mom's always cared about financial security." "Maybe." But there was doubt in her voice. "Dad, if something was really wrong, you'd tell me, right?" That question sat heavy between us. How was I supposed to tell her that her mother and husband were in this together? That the family she trusted was already crumbling behind the scenes? "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "But everything's fine. Just the usual business pressures." After we hung up, I stared at my notes. Mark pumping my own daughter for intel changed the picture. Their net was wider than I'd realized. If they wanted information, I'd make sure they got exactly what I wanted them to see. I was still chewing on Sophie's warning when my secure line rang. Sarah Chen, my accountant for a dozen years, came on with her trademark precision. "Ethan, I've got the asset protection documents ready. Since you mentioned updating your estate plan, I went ahead and found the most ironclad structure we can use." She paused. "This is about more than estate planning, isn't it?" Perceptive as always. 28 years in forensic accounting teaches you to read between the lines. "Do I want to know what kind of threat we're guarding against?" "Domestic," I said. She didn't ask more. She'd handled enough divorce cases for my foreman to understand the terrain. "Everything will be ready by noon. Once signed, your business assets will be out of reach from any personal legal action. Whoever's coming after you will never find the real money." By 10, I was across from Tom Bradley at First National Bank. Tom's been my golf partner for 15 years, and the mahogany conference room felt like home turf. "Account security review," I said, sliding the paperwork over. "I want every joint access point verified and temporarily frozen until we confirm identity in person." Tom raised an eyebrow. "This is thorough, Ethan. Every account, every credit line, every autopay. Every single one." "May I ask?" "You may not." I smiled when I said it. "Once you sign, it's immediate," he said. "And all parties get notified they need to show up in person with ID to restore access." "Perfect. This is going to inconvenience Linda." "I'm counting on it." The holds hit at 11:47 a.m., just as Linda was settling into lunch at Riverside Country Club. My phone buzzed at 12:03, first decline charge. By 12:15, she was calling. "Ethan, something's wrong with our accounts. My card was declined, and the bank says there's a security hold. Do you know anything about this?" I played it cool. No mention of Mark's name on the joint account. No mention of the $47,000 she'd funneled out. A security hold? That sounds serious. Did they say why? Something about identity verification. It's humiliating, Ethan. I'm sitting here with Linda and Susan and Janet and I can't even pay for lunch. Her distress was real, but not because the plan was unraveling. This was about the public embarrassment. "I'll call Tom Bradley right away," I told her. "We'll get it sorted." I didn't call Tom. I drove to the medical center site where my crew was pouring foundations instead. The sound of diesel engines and shouts over rebar grounded me better than any bank meeting. By 1:47 p.m. my phone pinged again. "Linda, still locked out." "This is ridiculous," she texted at 2:23 p.m. "Tom Bradley's secretary says he's in meetings all day." What kind of bank president ignores his best customers? By 3:15 p.m. another one popped up on my phone. "Even our emergency credit line is frozen. How am I supposed to buy groceries?" Every message she sent that afternoon was like a small, satisfying crack in a dam. For 25 years, Linda had lived with the quiet certainty that money would always be there, like air in her lungs, while I ground through 60-hour weeks to make sure it was. Now, for the first time, she was feeling what it was like when that comfort just vanished without warning. Mark's reaction, though, that was the real prize of the day. Around 4:30 p.m. my private investigator, Carlos, called with his update. "Your boy Thompson tried to dip into that joint account with your wife 3 separate times today. Nothing doing. Then he made a play for a trust account, looks like your daughter's education fund, probably thinking he could sneak something from there. That one's locked too, just like you asked." I could hear the grin in Mike's voice. He's been on the phone with the bank all afternoon, angry calls, legal threats, demanding to talk to someone in charge. Classic case of a cocky attorney realizing the floors dropped out from under him. By the time I got home at 6, I was sitting in my office like a general after a day on the battlefield, reviewing the damage. Every joint account, frozen solid. Every shared credit line, cut. Every automatic payment, now needing my say-so before a single dime left. Linda's access to 25 years of wealth had been reduced to whatever cash she happened to have in her purse. The beauty of it all? It was completely legal. Just a husband taking steps to safeguard marital assets while reviewing estate planning. Tom Bradley could truthfully say every banking protocol was followed to the letter. But Linda and Mark didn't need an explanation, they'd already gotten the real message. The man they'd hoped to sucker punch financially wasn't just blocking their shots anymore, he was swinging back. At 6:47 p.m. my phone rang with Linda's number. I knew before answering that her voice would be stripped of its usual manipulation. Desperation leaves no room for charm. Time to see how fast rats start turning on each other when the ship starts sinking. By 7:15, she was striding through the lobby of Thompson & Associates, her heels rapping sharp on the marble floor. I knew this because Mike had planted himself in the coffee shop across the street, watching the building like a hawk. He'd also heard her panicked phone call from our driveway. "Mark, we need to talk immediately. Something's gone terribly wrong." Loud enough for the neighbor to catch every word. Up on the 14th floor, Mark's office windows glowed. 2 silhouettes bent over a table piled with papers, their posture pure crisis mode. Thanks to the building's old ventilation system, and a friendly contact of Mike's in the accounting firm next door, Linda's voice carried clear as a bell. "Ethan knows. He's cutting us off from everything. I couldn't even buy gas for my car." Mark's reply was cool, clipped, his litigation voice fully engaged. "The timing's no accident. 3 days ago, you said he turned up at Sophie's house right when we were discussing strategy. He must have overheard something. How much could he have heard? She asked. Enough to know we're serious. We have to assume he recorded it, assets, timelines, everything. There was a pause. I could almost feel the panic settle between them. That's the sound conspirators make when they finally realize they've been playing checkers while their target was already 4 moves ahead in chess. What do we do? Linda asked, her confidence gone. We move fast. Monday morning, I file for an emergency divorce with immediate spousal support. We claim he's committing financial abuse by cutting you off from marital funds. Linda perked up. Financial abuse? That sounds legally compelling, Mark finished. We make him look like a controlling husband who uses money as a weapon. The frozen accounts become Exhibit A, not a defensive move. Papers rustled. I pictured him shifting into high gear. I need examples: emotional abuse, financial control, intimidation. Think about times he made money decisions without your input, questioned your spending, or used money to get what he wanted. That's going to be tough, Mark. Ethan's never been controlling with money. If anything, he's been too generous. Then we spin generosity into control. His providing for you becomes proof that he created dependency to keep you in line. Every gift, every luxury, every comfort, it all becomes part of a calculated isolation strategy. Their brazenness was almost artful, taking a quarter-century of hard work and care, and twisting it into a weapon. Linda hesitated. What about Sophie? She's not automatically going to back me. Her psychology training makes her suspicious of everything. That's perfect, Mark said, his voice sharp with satisfaction. Her hesitation becomes evidence of how completely Ethan has warped family dynamics. We present her psychology background as something he manipulated, turning her against you. If she expresses concern, we frame it as an expert opinion proving Ethan's abuse. You want to make my daughter testify against her father? I want to secure your financial future, Mark said evenly. Her professional training means her word carries weight. If she doubts you, it proves he's been manipulating her for years. It was elegant in the worst possible way, evil tied up with a neat little bow. Sophie's clinical detachment, the measured way she sipped her coffee before speaking, gave Linda exactly what she needed, a witness who thought she was just exploring possibilities, but whose every word could be reframed as confirmation of abuse. Financial control can be a form of domestic abuse, Sophie had said, the words clinical and precise. But when Linda repeated them later, they'd sound less like a Bethan-said observation and more like a professional diagnosis from a trained psychologist, his own daughter, no less. Or it could be legitimate financial management, Sophie added, but Linda barely heard that part. She'd edit that line out entirely when telling Mark, leaving only the damning half. Every time Sophie asked for his explanation, Linda mentally translated it into, he has no reasonable explanation. When Sophie suggested there might be identifiable triggers for his behavior, Linda filed it away as, even his daughter thinks something must have set him off, probably something dark. By the time the conversation ended, Linda had everything she needed. In reality, Sophie had been probing for facts. But in Linda's retelling, those same questions became proof of her father's instability, her neutral observations transformed into expert testimony that his controlling behavior was part of a deeper, marked pattern. Later, she texted Mark. Even Sophie's starting to see it. She says this kind of financial control is abuse. She's worried about him. Thinks he's changing. It didn't matter that Sophie had never said she was worried, or that she'd been careful not to jump to conclusions. Linda would frame her daughter's professional skepticism as the first crack in Ethan's credibility. And from that crack, they would pry open the rest of his life until the man was unrecognizable, even to his own child. Mom, are you asking for psychological advice, Sophie said, her tone razor-sharp, or are you ask? That single, blunt question cracked Linda's act like glass. Her carefully crafted image of the helpless wife had no effect here, her daughter wasn't reaching for the tissues, she was reaching for the truth. "I'm asking you to help me understand what's happening to our family," Linda tried again, pushing vulnerability into her voice. Then, Sophie replied, calm as a doctor delivering bad news, "I'd suggest you speak to Dad honestly about your concerns instead of asking me to diagnose him based on your interpretation of E." Linda left the cafe 20 minutes later, walking quickly, shoulders tight. I'm told she was furious that Sophie had treated her like any other patient instead of the wounded mother in her story. But beneath that anger was something sharper, fear. If Sophie wouldn't blindly back her, the victim narrative she and Mark were building could collapse. 40 miles. Ethan. I sat. Word. I set my. Serious. That numb. Jack, would. Absol. I spent the next. I didn't call as a whistleblower. I called as a potential client doing reference checks. And once they started talking, they didn't hold back, warning me about Mark's habit of dipping into client funds, missing payment deadlines, and bending the truth until. By 1 o'clock, I had a neatly documented chain of evidence, names, amounts, timelines, and a pattern of behavior that would make the Bar Association salivate. At 2:30 p.m. I picked up the phone and. "I'd like to file a formal complaint regarding attorney misconduct," I told the intake specialist. I laid it all out: trust account misuse, misleading industry professionals, 3 contractors ready to testy. By 4 o'clock, Mark's law office was already getting calls from the bar about expedited hearings. His professional reputation, the foundation of his attacks on me, was. At 4:47 p.m. Carlos texted me. "Thompson just left his office with 3 boxes. No need," I typed back. "I know X. Mark wouldn't be thinking straight now. He'd go straight to Linda, panic burning up the careful strategy they'd spent weeks building. The conspiracy that started so clean and confident was about to turn into a frantic scramble." 2 days later, Sophie had had time to think, really think, about everything. She made the drive to my office like someone walking toward a truth they'd been avoiding for why. "My building isn't flashy, brick, steel, and honest labor, not the glass and chrome facade Mark hides behind." Sarah, my secretary of 8 years, met her at the door with the warmth you reserve for real family. "He's expecting you, honey. Go right in." I stood when she entered, studying her body language. After 25 years of reading Linda's moods, I'd gotten good at it. But Sophie wasn't carrying her mother's brand of performance. She was all professional posture, clinical calm, the look of someone who's already decided where they stand. "Dad," she said evenly, "we need to talk about what's going on between you and Mom." Her voice carried that measured, clinical calm she probably used with her most volatile patients. "I've been picking this apart for the last 2 days," she said, "and I need to hear your side of things." "What's your mother been telling you?" I asked. "That you've been showing controlling behavior, manipulating finances, maybe even crossing into emotional abuse." She sat down across from my desk, her hands folded neatly like she was at a deposition. "She wants me to back up her victim story with my professional credentials." Hearing my own daughter speak in the kind of detached, textbook language I usually heard in court was jarring, but I recognized the tactic. She was pulling herself out of the emotional current so she could examine the facts without bias. "And what's your take?" I asked. "I think Mom tried to work me the same way she's been trying to work you." Sophie's green eyes, Linda's eyes, but without the cloud of manipulation, studied me like she was gauging whether I could handle what came next. "Show me the proof, Dad. I need to hear what you heard." I hesitated. Playing that recording meant there was no putting the genie back in the bottle. Once she heard it, she couldn't unhear the truth about her mother, and her husband. But Sophie wasn't a kid anymore. She was 30 years old, a licensed psychologist, and fully capable of handling reality. I hit play on my phone. Linda's voice filled the room, dripping with contempt. "When the old fool finally signs the papers, we'll have everything we planned for. Sophie didn't flinch at first. Her face stayed neutral as she listened to her mother dismantle 25 years of marriage like it was a business transaction, heard Mark laying out his legal strategy for maximum damage, and absorbed their cold calculations about timing and assets. But when Linda said, 25 years of playing the devoted wife, I saw a crack form in her professional armor. Her hands clenched for a moment before she made herself relax. When the recording ended, the silence between us stretched like a bridge neither of us was sure we wanted to cross. How long have you known? She finally asked. 6 days. I overheard it at your place last Tuesday. And since then you've been, what? Building a counterattack while pretending nothing's wrong. Something like that. She leaned back, processing. Mom asked me to assess your mental state. She wanted a professional opinion that you were showing abusive patterns. What did you tell her? That I can't ethically diagnose anyone without a proper evaluation, and that her claims didn't match the behavior I've seen from you over the years. There was a flash of anger in Sophie's voice now. She tried to use my training as a weapon, against you and against my profession. The betrayal hung between us, heavy and personal. I'm sorry you got pulled into this, sweetheart. I'm not, she said, her voice sharp with certainty. I'm glad I know the truth. The question is, what happens now? I studied her. She had the strength I'd tried to raise her with, but the independence to make her own calls. That's up to you. I'm not going to ask you to take sides. I already have. She stood, her decision carved in stone. I choose truth over blind loyalty. I choose facts over feelings. And I'm backing the parent who didn't try to manipulate my ethics. Relief hit me first, followed by the quiet worry of what she might do next. What about Mark? I asked. What about him? She replied, her tone suddenly colder. My husband took part in a plan to financially ruin my father and used my career as cover. That marriage is done. Sophie. Dad, this isn't anger talking. It's a judgment based on behavior and character. The facts are all I need. She started for the door, then paused. I'll tell the truth about our family if it comes to that. But I'm not letting myself become anyone's weapon, not yours, not hers. I understand. Good. Because there's something I have to take care of. She left with the stride of someone who had finally found her moral compass, and 20 minutes later she'd be standing in her own home, face to face with the man who'd burned every bridge she thought they'd built together. I sat alone in my office, surrounded by 35 years of honest work, and for the first time in this whole mess, I felt something close to hope, that maybe, just maybe, the truth would actually mean something. That night, at 7:30, Sophie's key turned in her lock. Mark looked up, startled. He clearly hadn't expected her home early. He was sprawled on the couch, legal papers scattered on the coffee table, half a bottle of whiskey within easy reach. We need to talk, she said, setting her purse down with precision that was anything but casual. Rough day? He asked without looking up, pretending to be absorbed in some file. The Barrick deposition got postponed again. I know about the conspiracy, Mark. His head snapped up. The polished lawyer mask slipped, and for the first time in years, she saw desperation. What conspiracy? The one where you and my mother tried to financially destroy my father while using my credentials to back up fake abuse claims. She stayed standing, holding the high ground. I heard the recording. Every word. He set his glass down slowly, like that might buy him time. Sophie, I think you're 25 years of playing the devoted wife. Ring any bells? The blood drained from his face. Mark, man who could talk circles around a Supreme Court justice, looked like someone watching the walls close in. How much did you hear? Everything. The strategy, the timeline, your fees, Mom's commentary on her own performance. She sat across from him now, all business. Was our entire marriage part of that plan? 3 days later, Linda learned that reputations can burn faster than lawsuits move. At the Riverside Country Club's Saturday brunch, she walked in like she owned the place. But the clusters of women that normally greeted her seemed to fall into sudden, hushed conversations. Linda Patterson, her bridge partner for half a decade, suddenly found her Eggs Benedict fascinating. Susan Morrison cut their chat short with a sudden, urgent phone call. By the time Linda reached her usual table, she could read the room. Word had gotten out. "Linda, dear." Janet Crawford's voice was sweet enough to rot teeth. "We missed you at the planning committee meeting yesterday." "What meeting?" "No one told me." "Oh, you didn't get the message. We had to make a few changes. You understand." And just like that, the phone calls dried up, the invitations stopped coming, and the social doors shut one by one. Meanwhile, I was running my own campaign, and mine had traction. 35 years of honest work had bought me something Linda didn't have: credibility. My lunch with Tom Bradley from the bank hit exactly the right notes. I mentioned family difficulties, with enough detail to be factual without sounding petty. "Linda and my son-in-law have been working on some troubling plans regarding my assets," I said over coffee. "I've had to put safeguards in place." Tom's response was exactly what I wanted: professional understanding with a side of personal sympathy. That evening, at the Chamber of Commerce meeting, Jack Morrison asked why Linda skipped the last fundraiser. I answered with just the right shade of disappointment. "Sometimes you find out people aren't who you thought they were," I said. "After 25 years, turns out she had plans. Well, let's just say I'm glad I learned about them when I did." By Sunday night, Linda was fully on the outside looking in. The country club had already scheduled a routine review of her membership. The charity board accepted her resignation. Funny thing, she'd never actually offered it. Mark's downfall matched Linda's social freefall, only his came in the courtroom instead of the country club. Within a week, 3 big clients pulled their business, citing serious concerns about judgment and ethics. One of them, Miller Industries, worth $200,000 a year in billings, sent a letter flat out saying they no longer trusted him with their legal matters. Sunday night, through the thin walls of their apartment, I heard Linda's voice carrying panic like smoke. "Everybody knows, Mark. Everyone. I can't walk into the club, the market, anywhere in this town." "We'll hit him Monday morning," Mark said. "Emergency motions. Force Ethan to play defense." "Before what?" "Before you lose your license. Before I'm stuck moving back to my sister's place in Minnesota." They bickered for hours, both realizing, maybe for the first time, that sharing guilt doesn't mean sharing a way out. Tomorrow, they'd try one last wild swing. I was ready for it. Monday morning, Linda walked into the downtown office of Linda Hawthorne, a divorce lawyer famous for taking no prisoners. Hawthorne's conference room had a perfect view of the courthouse Linda dreamed of using to take me apart. Problem was, the lawyer's face said she didn't see much firepower to work with. "Mrs. Cole," Hawthorne began, her voice polite but edged, "I've gone through your documents. Your husband's financial protections are airtight. Joint account holders can absolutely limit access during marital disputes. But that's financial abuse." Linda protested, her carefully constructed victim tone starting to wobble. "He's controlling every penny we've earned together." "Money he earned," Hawthorne said, tapping the tax summaries, "for the last 25 years. Your personal income appears minimal." The flush in Linda's cheeks told me that homemaker sounded a lot less dignified when it became financially dependent on paper. "What about emotional abuse?" she pressed. "Intimidation? Gaslighting? Specific incidents you can prove?" Hawthorne asked flatly. Linda's silence was telling. She'd spent nights trying to piece together believable abuse stories out of 25 years of me holding doors, paying bills, and listening to her talk about vacation plans. "Any threats? Physical intimidation? Preventing you from seeing friends or family?" "Well, no, but..." Mrs. Cole, abuse cases need evidence, Hawthorne said. And there it was, hole punched clean through her story. 10 blocks away, Mark was learning his own lesson in evidence. The State Bar's Ethics Committee called first thing. Mr. Thompson, the voice on the line said, "We've received complaints about how you've handled client trust accounts. Specifically, allegations that you've been using client funds for personal expenses." Mark's tone got tight. "Those allegations are false." The committee member didn't sound convinced. "We have invoices from Martinez Electrical, dated 8 months ago, with notes saying payment would come after client settlement. Your client settled 6 months ago. Where is that money?" Answer: his personal checking account, where he'd been quietly covering rent and student loans. What he'd thought of as creative cash flow now looked a lot like theft. "We're scheduling a hearing for Thursday morning. Bring 18 months of complete client financial records." By Wednesday night, they were both sitting in Mark's half-empty office, talking like doomed generals before a last stand. "We have to file domestic violence claims," Linda said, voice brimming with false confidence. "It's the only way to put him on the defensive." "Linda," Mark said, "filing false DV claims is a felony, especially if he's got evidence." "What evidence?" she demanded, then stopped cold. She remembered the recording. "It proves we were strategizing about money, not talking about abuse," Mark reminded her. "So we reframe it," she shot back. "Your legal skills, my testimony. Turn it into a story about long-term emotional control." 6 months ago, she'd been bored, looking for a thrill. Now she was talking about perjury in federal court like it was a weekend hobby. "If this fails," Mark said slowly, "we're both looking at criminal charges." "If we don't try," she countered, "I'm broke and you're disbarred anyway. At least this way, we go down swinging." Thursday morning's restraining order hearing would be their last gamble. They had no idea I'd spent all week documenting their calls, meetings, and lies, every move they made while they thought they were on the attack. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was building the case that would finish them. He wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was building a prosecution case. The Davenport County Courthouse felt different that May 1st, as if 35 years of honest reputation had finally solidified into something I could carry like armor into battle. Judge Patricia Hendricks presided over domestic relations court with no-nonsense efficiency. She'd seen every form of family deception imaginable, and she was not impressed. Linda sat at the plaintiff's table with Linda Hawthorne beside her. She wore the carefully curated look of a battered wife, conservative dress, minimal makeup, a nervousness that might have been genuine, if the stakes weren't so high and the performance so rehearsed. "Mrs. Cole," Judge Hendricks began, flipping through the emergency restraining order petition. "You allege your husband has engaged in financial abuse and intimidation. Can you describe specific incidents that led you to fear for your safety?" Linda's voice trembled, perfectly practiced. "Your Honor, for months, my husband has restricted my access to our accounts, monitored my spending, and threatened what would happen if I tried to leave." "What kind of threats, Mrs. Cole?" "Financial threats," she said, pausing for dramatic effect. "That I'd be left with nothing, that he'd use his business connections to destroy my reputation. Last week, he cut off my access to money, even for basic necessities." I sat back in my chair, watching the woman I'd called my wife for 25 years commit perjury with mounting confidence. Every lie built on the last, creating a fictional narrative about a man who had spent decades providing every comfort she demanded. Judge Hendricks turned to my attorney, James Morrison. "Does the defend market wish to respond?" James stood, calm and steady, 30 years of courtroom battles behind him. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Cole's claims are false and part of a deliberate conspiracy to defraud the defend market of marital assets." The judge raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious allegation, Counselor." "I have Exhibit A," James said, connecting his phone to the courtroom's audio system. Linda's voice filled the room. "When the old fool finally signs the papers, we'll have everything we planned for. For 43 minutes, Judge Hendricks listened as the entire conspiracy played out, Linda's cruel mockery of our marriage, Mark's calculated legal strategy, their plan to weaponize Sophie's psychology credentials. The man actually believes I love him, Linda sneered on the recording, dripping with contempt. I watched her victim act unravel in real time. Her tearful testimony about fearing for her safety became absurd beside the sound of her laughing about manipulating me. Judge Hendricks stopped the recording. Mrs. Cole, do you have any response? Linda's mouth opened, then closed. No words came. Linda Hawthorne's face drained of color. Your Honor, I request permission to withdraw as counsel. I was not made aware of these circumstances when I agreed to represent Mrs. Cole. Motion granted. The judge fixed Linda with a stare that could freeze fire. Mrs. Cole, I'm dismissing your restraining order petition with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of possible perjury charges. The gavel came down with a finality that echoed through the courtroom, and through my life. 2 weeks later, the divorce settlement reflected Linda's catastrophic miscalculation. Her documented deception destroyed any claim to spousal support. The prenuptial agreement she'd long forgotten, signed back in 1997, limited her share to a bare minimum. Mark's law license suspension became permanent disbarment when the Bar Association uncovered $127,000 in missing client funds. Last I heard, he'd moved to Nebraska and was working as a paralegal. Sophie filed for divorce the day after the hearing, citing irreconcilable differences. She's now building a new practice focused on family therapy, with a special expertise in recognizing manipulation. 6 months later, Linda works retail in the very mall where she once spent my money on luxury items. Neither of us misses the irony. I rebuilt Cole Construction's reputation stronger than ever. The community rallied behind me during those dark times, turning tough family battles into new contracts and deeper business ties. The house feels different now, quieter, honest. No more scripted conversations, no more calculated affection. Just the sound of rain tapping on the windows I built with my own hands, in a home that's finally mine again. Linda was right about one thing, I did believe she loved me. Now I know the difference between love and performance. If you liked this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.